A very good evening to all our viewers, and welcome to this edition of the agenda. My name is Toivan Jabala, your host, and tonight we are doing things slightly differently because of course, the COVID situation in the country, where we are trying to avoid as much personal contact as possible, and therefore we are doing it online tonight. There might be some glitches along the way, but we hope our viewers will understand why tonight seems a bit different. Tonight, I'm very, very happy, extremely happy to have on the show the Minister of Public Enterprises, Honorable Leon Jooste, and of course, also joining us tonight on the show is Vincia Cloete, who is a seasoned corporate governance expert. Minister, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Toivo. Good evening to your viewers as well. So happy that you created this platform and looking forward to engage.
Indeed. Welcome also, Vincia. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Toivo, and the viewers. I'm also happy to engage on this evening.
Indeed. We'll start with you, Minister Jooste. You took over this new portfolio at the time in 2015, the Minister of Public Enterprises. Walk us through your journey, especially where you found public enterprises, the state in which you found them when you initiated this ministry, what has been done, and where we are today.
Thank you, Toivo. That's a very loaded question to start off on. But I think just in an executive summary, the important thing when the ministry was created was for us to understand really what was the status at that time. So what was the status of our public enterprises, the governance environment, the ownership policy environment, etc., and then to really understand what the reasons are, the core reasons for the potential failures that or the perceived failures in our public enterprises. So the first 6 months to a year, we spent a lot of time on doing research, and we were lucky that we were able at that time to do a bit of benchmarking. So with some targeted countries where they've been extremely successful in reforming the public enterprises, to understand their journey and most importantly, probably to learn from their mistakes. So in essence, Toivo, what we found is a fundamental flaw was the ownership model that we had at that time. So we had a ownership model which was not centralized at all, so no uniform governance and shareholder oversight at all. So the various public enterprises were reported to multiple different ministries. So what you would find in such a situation is that each ministry, as shareholder representative, would inevitably conduct themselves in a different manner. So that creates a lot of confusion and a lot of varied quality of governance and the exercise of ownership rights. Critical that we understood that. Obviously many other problems that we identified as well. So the first thing we then had to do was to rectify that core major principle, being the way that we own our public enterprises. And from our benchmarking, we learned and it became very clear that to centralize the ownership would be the right thing to do. And it's worked extremely well in other countries as well. The complication then for us came in the form of existing legislation. So in our case, most of our public enterprises have their own dedicated statutes which determine how they should be governed, etc. And so we needed to find a way around that and to centralize ownership at the same time. And the second complication was that in our case in Namibia, we allowed for a large number of enterprises to be recognized as public enterprises, where they, in most other countries, would not enjoy such classification. And there I'm talking about what we are now calling the non-commercial public enterprises. So your regulators and some service providers, etc. So that created a huge dilemma for us, because we felt that it would not be good to just completely, in plain English, to dump all of those in the corporate governance wilderness and not have some, or make sure that the is oversight in those entities as well. So we had to figure out the appropriate policy and legal instruments to accommodate those, together with centralizing the ownership of the commercial public enterprises. So that's why it took much longer than we had hoped for to get the new law passed, and we eventually did in 2019 pass the Public Enterprise Governance Act and operationalize that towards the end of, well, in fact, on 16 December 2019. And then after that, as we know, last year COVID hit us, and it's put a brake on many of our efforts. But yeah, so in the meantime, we have, and we probably going to miss many of those in this program. We started to do a lot of the soft issues and attempted to address some of the governance flaws and implemented a number of measures to do that. But in a summary, that is where we came from and where we are now. So centralized ownership, with the Ministry of Public Enterprise has taken ownership of the commercial public enterprises, while having governance oversight of the non-commercial ones. And now we are implementing the law, and seeing some improvements already.
Indeed. Thank you, Minister Jooste, for that elaborate answer. Vincia, I know that there were a few technical glitches between you and I here, but I hope it's better now. Let's try. What can you tell us in terms of the evolution that has taken place over the years, having, I'm sure, served in the old regime of doing things and still serving in the current regime? Just the evolution that has taken place, if any, but what can you tell us about that?
So, good evening again, Trevor. I'm glad to be back on. So I echo exactly what the minister has said. I mean, it was very important in the, obviously over the years, there's been corporate governance, but the openness and the compliance, therefore, has not been a central point of focus. And if it was really done behind the veil. And at this stage, we have entered an era where more and more corporate governance is highlighted as very important for thriving businesses. And so one of the things the minister has said with the establishment of the Ministry of Public Enterprises is that obviously governance has become a focal point, and we know that the ministry has started implementing various strategies in ensuring that there is compliance with corporate governance in different areas of business at large. So yes, the evolution is that there has been an introduction of the Namibian Code of Corporate Governance, which was a really big step in not only just following the landscape of South Africa, as it were, but localizing the King 3 into the NAM code and ensuring that listed entities, but businesses in general follow corporate governance and the ideals and the tenets of corporate governance at large. So that transformation has occurred in terms of the NAM code, and now more and more we tend to see that entities lean towards following the King 4, which South Africa has adopted in 2016 November. So we have now come to adopting more and more of King 4. And as the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance, we do acknowledge the existence of the NUM code, but we encourage more and more entities, public entities and commercial entities, private entities, to start to adopt the principles of the King 4, especially because of the 4 outcomes that are outlined in the King 4 that make it so easier to apply the King 4 or the principles governance principles of corporate governance that are enunciated therein. So the evolution from the NUM code to a gradual acknowledgement and application of the King 4 and the ESG standards across Namibia is really a good thing, and this should filter into public entities as well. And I think it's starting to filter in because more and more between the Institute of Corporate Governance and the Minister of Public or the Ministry of Public Enterprises, there's conversation that is starting in how we can take our entities from just the act that we have created, from just paper in terms of the corporate governance and the governance and the performance agreements that are in place, to actually implementing this and to ensuring that there is assessment of where we are at in terms of implementation and in terms of compliance to corporate governance. So that should be the nutshell of the evolution that is happening. So we are not stagnant. We are getting to a place where we're having more conversation, not just conversations, but also in terms of starting to implement and starting to ensure that not just on a tick box approach basis, but in a comprehensive, holistic, integrated basis of implementing really and ensuring that corporate governance is a fabric that runs across all entities. Thank you to everyone.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Vincia. I'm glad because I can clearly hear you now, as opposed
I'm
to
happy.
when we started. I'm glad. I mean, Minister, the great from as far as corporate governance is concerned is a dark one in so many ways. You would hear, for example, at the time that words like patronage, played were always in the mix. Unqualified boards, and one of the things that you did, Minister, was to create a database to which qualified people and whatnot could just put their CVs, and making also easier your job to select from those when filling those board positions. How much do you think issues such as patronage and just people who were appointed mostly really on the basis of their political allegiances, how much do you think that has led to the status from which we are trying to migrate now?
Thank you, Toivo. Yeah, so I'm always careful to talk about the past, and of course, we referring to maybe something that was in place before the ministry was created, etc. But it might have been the case. But I think the topic we are touching on is really at the heart of the successful reform of our public enterprises. So we internally, and I've said this on many platforms as well, if we get one thing right, and only one thing, it must be to appoint the right quality people to our boards of public enterprises. Then if we manage to do that, we would have solved literally 90% of the problem. So, and when I say the right people, then we talk to individuals who have the right amount of appropriate skills, experience, but most important of all, people of good standing. So people with integrity. That is, and sometimes more elusive than one would imagine. So that is why I can tell you, if that was the case previously, it's definitely not the case anymore. So, You mentioned the database, and it's true. We did establish, one of the first things we did, we established a database. So we advertise and ask for people to make themselves available, and slowly built up a database in the ministry from where we could draw potential board members. But then we went much further than that. So we designed a framework, a guideline for the recruitment of public enterprise board members. And I honestly, without patting myself on the back, but I think we've done a really good job with that guideline. So it's making it extremely transparent. And so I'll quickly tell you what it does. So what it does is that we appoint a committee that is made up of members of our ministry and whatever other line ministry is in place. And then they identify what the ideal composition for particular board should be and the minimum requirements for each category of board member on a board. So for instance, the minimum requirements of a lawyer on that board and of the financial person, etc. And then after that, we advertise in local media. So it's an open advertisement that is placed, and then there's a normal shortlisting process. Then we appoint a interview panel that consists of a combination of ministry personnel, but balanced with private sector experts from that appropriate sector. So we draw experts from private sector, from a particular sector to participate. So it's a completely transparent, independent process. I can tell you, as the minister responsible, the first time I ever see any name of a person that has applied, been listed or shortlisted or disqualified is when I receive the final report from that panel and from the committee. And then what the guideline does, it then says that I have the powers and the legal powers to appoint. So I am not bound by law to necessarily agree with the recommendations from that committee. But if I do, I must motivate why I disagree with the recommendations. I must then meet with that committee, explaining to them. And most important of all, when I make the cabinet submission of that board appointment, I have to reveal that I chose for particular reasons to replace a certain person and why I chose to do so. So cabinet will be informed that I wanted to make a specific change and what the reasons were, and that I managed to convince the committee that it was for the right reason. So I think any sort of patronage or anything of a similar kind would be very difficult to fall in between the cracks of what is really a very good, independent and transparent process. Then just one step further, we also recently introduced an online e-recruitment system. So it still has a number of technical glitches, which I apologize for, but it's a web-based system where anybody can log into, upload their own information onto the system, see exactly what vacancies exist in public enterprises, the requirements for applying, etc. So again, using technology to make it even more transparent, more accessible, and I think more fair in many ways. So I'm quite excited about that. Yeah, so I really believe we've come quite far. The challenge still is, Toivo, and I never miss an opportunity to appeal for this. We can only appoint the people that make themselves available. So I often get this question after we appoint a board and we make the names public. Then there might be some complaints and people say, yes, but we know there are so many Namibians with this particular skill, and so why did you not appoint X, Y, and Z or whatever? And the fact is that the people that I just described when I started, so those qualified professional people with integrity, many of them are not making themselves available, so we really need for more Namibians to put up their hands and to serve on our boards and to help us. This is a Namibian journey. It's not only that of this ministry or the government. These are incredibly important entities that provide services and products that are critical for our economy and for the people of this country. So we need these people, and we need for them to make themselves available. But in a nutshell, Toivo, so I think we've improved massively, and I must say that from some of the recent boards we've appointed, I'm extremely excited about. So managed to appoint a number of entirely new faces and people who fit this profile that I described perfectly, and that makes our job a whole lot.
Okay. Yeah. No. Thank you, Minister. I lost you a little bit towards the end, but so we go for a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back again shortly. And we are back. I will start with you, Vincia, for this segment of the show. The minister alluded to something very important in terms of really focusing on qualifications, to say that indeed people appointed to these institutions are qualified. In your experience, as this evolution again continues, how helpful has it been for persons like yourself to be finally put together with people of integrity, people who can also help you? Because I mean, a lot of SOEs, the challenge now is that you have a person like Vincia Cloete, who's clearly qualified, and then she's bundled together uh, with what's difficult. How helpful has it been that you are now sort of put together with people really who know their stuff?
Oh, I don't know where to start with that one, but I would like to say that in the context of my appointment to, for instance, the NAMPOD board, I just recently had a board meeting, and at the end of this meeting, we sort of just said to reflect on the meeting and on the quality of the composition of the board itself, and it was good to actually say that we as a board, however this composition came about, obviously by application and by selection process and so forth, we are made up of a very good people who are competent in the fields that they are experts in, people who have general knowledge of corporate governance, and people who just have a general knowledge of the industry. And the good mix of those skills is what makes the board eligible and competent to lead an institute, for instance, as big as NAMPOD. So what I want to really drive at is to say that, as the minister has alluded to earlier, very important that there is a good skill set of composition, a mix of good skill set in essence. So not only just your educational background, not only expertise in a specific field, not only knowledge in the industry and the business that you're going to serve on as a governing body or as a director. Not only those things, but most of all, integrity. People who have a sense of just their moral duty. So what has been the case over the years in terms of corruption, and so can be adequately dealt with. So the aspects, the soft aspects, have also been looked at, and I can see it in the people that I have been put together with, that absolute independence in their thinking, absolute independence and objectivity in their judgment of issues and their dealing of issues. And those are very issues: avoiding conflict of interest, managing conflicts of interest. People who are able to do this in and of themselves, and don't have to wait for a piece of paper or other people to call on you to actually exude these traits and qualities that make up a good directorship. So being paired with people who are of not only great competence but have integrity and those soft skills that make a board more excellent in execution has been a great experience for me. So there has been evolution in that area, and I can confirm that just from that board alone, that the ministry has done a great job. But also on a general level, and coming back to the whole process of select interviews and how the minister is involved in appointing, the patronage aspect of it. Important to note that it's a very rigorous process, and we have seen. I have served on that committee, that selection committee, and a very rigorous process. And while people think that it's easy to just apply and just come and sit without knowing about just the industry that you're going to serve on, about general aspects of corporate governance. And this is the approach that people have towards public entities. I think that we forget that public entities have strategic importance to the economy of the country as a whole, and our involvement is important, not only in applying because we want to sit on these lucrative, or what seems to be lucrative, positions as directors, but that we will recognize that our skills and our expertise are important to driving our PEs, our public entities, to another level of being successful. And because they're the beacons of strategy in our country in terms of, or as far as it concerns the economy. So when we avail ourselves, and this is a very key issue, when we avail ourselves to directorship, we should approach it from a more serious point of intervention, such that we don't only come thinking, oh, it's a public entity and I'm just going to sit on a board and we're going to make decisions. No, we come knowing what is the industry that we're entering. If it is transportation, then you should have some knowledge about that, and have a small basic knowledge about corporate governance, ethics, ethical leadership, and small things that make us into great leaders together as a team. So these are the small things that we're looking at, or the big things that we're looking at. But I'm also encouraging, as the minister has said, that people avail themselves to directorships, and we need quality people. We don't want to rotate around the same people, but we need to have quality people. And there are many quality people out there. We encourage you to apply, and when you apply, to really apply yourself, not just on paper, but practically. Come to these interviews prepared, come with a sense of urgency, sense of importance for what you are, attaching importance to what it is that you're applying for. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, I have one more question for the minister and one more for Ms. Cloete. Minister, one of my observations as you continued to drive these reforms is, and I think you alluded it to slightly, is that it has not been without opposition from certain segments of society. I remember at some stage you even had to defend yourself. People saying, "Oh, the minister is closing down Namibia because he has interest in another private airline, and therefore it's a white cartel or whatever." Those kind of words we heard them at the time. How much of this kind of rhetoric has on your decision making? Do you sometimes how much of that influence how you do business at the ministry?
Yo, thank you, Toivo. That's in fact a very good question. So very pointed, and it's I can't deny that. But you know what it is, and it's not strange, and we should not even get upset about this sort of thing. I think human nature dictates that people overall are resistant to change. So whenever and we history. So I met, for instance, the person. Singapore is one of the countries where they've most successfully reformed their public enterprises. In fact, they are basically the benchmark when it comes to that globally. So what they did in their case, they established a holding company that owned all the public enterprises, and so they are owned and governed through a holding company that reports to the Ministry of Finance. So at the moment, and for many years, it's been the benchmark, and it's worked incredibly well for that country. But if you, and I was very fortunate to have met the gentleman who was the first director of that company when it was established. It's called Temasek. And he will tell you when you speak to him that it was absolutely hell when they did that. So they received government to him received death threats at that time for wanting to take that particular governance route, which proved to be remarkable. So that's human nature. People don't like change. So it actually gets very interesting. So people are not happy with the way that things are, and as soon as one makes a proposal for some sort of a reform, then you are met with resistance. So I've always used this Einstein quote, which is the definition for insanity: doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So if we want different results, we need to change the way we are doing things. So but the direct answer, Toivo, whoever is sitting in this office of mine, and I'm the person that's here at the moment, should not be influenced by that sort of rhetoric and that resistance to change and to reform. So if I allow to influence the recommendations we make and the proposals we implement, which must be guided by it being in the best interest of our country and its people, then quite frankly, I should not be in this office, and neither should be anybody else. So it's going to be uncomfortable. Many of the things we will not be popular and will meet resistance. But if we are convinced this is for the right reasons that we are making those proposals, then we've got to take whatever comes with it. And I'm very fortunate. I have an entire cabinet. So I know I'm always the one in the firing line. And you referred to the Namibia issue, but the reality, Toivo, is we are one government, we are one cabinet, and we are supported by our president, and this is the way it should be. So we take all of that flag together, and I'm happy when I get isolated from time to time because of the portfolio I occupy, but I'm confident that the things we are doing is for the right reason. So I'm happy to take what comes with that.
Okay. Then the last question to Ms. Cloete really is the one of the things that Minister Jooste has done successfully is also to create a cap of how many boards a person can serve on. We have had situations where people really were on so many boards that you question what kind of human being, what kind of fabric were they made in, so much that they have the magic wand to do everything at once, including their full-time jobs. From a corporate governance point of view, how much attention do you think the directors can now give to each of these institutions, given that fairly they have a lighter workload in the context of the quantity? What kind of quality can they bring to the table now that things are done this way?
Thank you, Trevor. A very good thing. This deals with the aspect of overboarding. We don't want directors to overboard, and that basically means that Vincia in all the boards in Namibia, I would be thinly, my time would be thinly spread if I were to sit on even 5, 6, 7 public entity boards at the same time, because the quality that I would bring in terms of time that I need to give attention to a certain board, like I said, would be thinly spread, and then the quality would obviously be sort of like no quality at all, actually. So what are we saying about quality and what has been done? The minister has directed that you at least serve on maximum 2 public entity boards. And I think that was a key thing to do so that we can increase the quality of attention that we render to the boards that we serve. While we may think that serving more boards, it could bring more income, more presence in that stage and so on. It's not about that. It's about the quality that we bring to boards as directors. So yes, that cap definitely translates to quality. And it is just general truism that serving on a board as a director it's an arduous job. It takes time. It's time consuming, and it's a lot of expertise and attention from one's end. So when you divide yourself in many places that you cannot be at one time or at any given time, and where you cannot give quality contributions, is really us doing disservice to public entities and to the government at large. So this is a very good governance requirement, and I think because you can serve at least on entity boards, and then obviously you can serve on private entities as well. So how that time is spent is really a determination that one has to make for yourself, because when you are applying and you already know that you are sitting on 10 other private boards, and now you want to serve on more public entity boards, then you already know for yourself that your time is thinly spread and you cannot bring about the quality, especially in the contribution that you will make to the board that you are responsible for. And it's very important that you not just rock up at meetings, but that you are prepared adequately for the meeting you are attending, because at meetings we're not just sitting to have the executives or the management relay things to us or information to us. We literally have to apply our minds to the information that will be relayed to us, and that means that we take time before the meetings to apply our minds to the agenda at hand. And how can I do that effectively if my time is thinly spread? And not only are you a director, you definitely are a parent, you have a full-time job, or you have other commitments in terms of business or whatever else it is that that directors do aside from being a director. So measure these aspects and see how best quality and contribution you can bring to a board by limiting yourself, quality over quantity. So I think that's a very good initiative, a very basic governance principle that the ministry has instituted, and we applaud for that. And that also allows not only for quality, but also for to limit overboarding, and also to allow new faces to serve on boards while we maintain continuity on boards and so on. Thank you, Trevor.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Vincia, for that. Tonight's show is bittersweet for me for two reasons. Bitter because it is too short, but sweet because the input is incredible from both the minister and Ms. Cloete. We have to end it here, but I will knock again very soon on your door because I can't live with not having to call you back again on this show to continue this important conversation. So thank you, Minister, very much for making time, and also Vincia for really hanging in there despite small technical glitches. But I think in the end we have done justice to the subject under the circumstances.
Thank you, Toyvon. And I would love to have a part two of the show. As you are saying, we've got many subjects to cover, and I would love to share that with the public. So I'll be very much available. Thank you, Toyvon.
Lovely.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, and thank you, Trevor. I would definitely be available for a follow-up session, because there is just so much more that we did not cover in this session, and so much more that we really could put out in terms of corporate governance, where we are at as a nation, where we want to go. And there are so many aspects that are happening right now, current issues that we have not been able to touch on because of time constraints and so on. But it'd be so good to come back and just talk about other pertinent corporate governance issues. This is the time to talk about these issues. And the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance, headed by myself, is really keen in this time to link up with the ministry and to sort out these corporate governance issues. And this is what we're working on. Thank you so much, Trevor.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it really. We'll talk again soon.